Welcome back to Tocqueville Talks. We're in Strasbourg, France, believe it or not. And we're recording this on one of Furman's May experiences, May X. And on this trip, we happen to have 3 of next year's Tocqueville Fellows. And what's more, all 3 of them are Tocqueville interns. So why don't we start with Maddie? Introduce yourself, go on down, and then we'll get started.
Hey y'all, it's Maddie. I am a rising senior at Furman. I am a double major, politics and history, with a double minor as well. This will be my 2nd year as a Tocqueville intern, and I'm very excited about this.
Hello everyone, my name is LaComb. I am a rising junior from Lexington, South Carolina, double majoring in economics and politics, and I will be the Beaumont Fellows intern for next year.
Hey there, Lane Lytle, rising senior as well, politics and religion double major. Pleasure to be with y'all.
Yeah, great. Now, all of you have been on the podcast before. That wasn't by design, the fact that you're on this trip. But yeah, this trip is called United Europe, Past and Present. We're along with Professor Jason Hansen from the History Department. And why don't I start with Lane? Tell us a little bit about where we have been and what we're studying.
Well, Dr. Nelson, I think the question is, where haven't we been while we've been here? We started out in Brussels, Belgium, and then we went through to Aachen, Germany, and then we went to Luxembourg, and now we're ending in Strasbourg. And we start with Rome, and we've gone all the way to the present day with Europe.
I've also had good opportunities to visit some other cities, including Bruges and Ghent. A lot of very cool Gothic architecture, and these cities are very historical still. They've been renovated and refurbished, but you can still see the buildings and what they would have looked like during the medieval period and Middle Ages.
Don't forget about Antwerp and the importance of the ports there in, was it the Middle Ages? Mm-hmm. The Middle Ages, and how that affected Bruges and the surrounding countries.
Yeah, so we've been looking at both the political attempts to unite Europe, as well as some of the ways in which economics ties the European continent together. And that brought us to Brussels, where a lot of the European institutions are, the institutions of the EU, and also then to Luxembourg to see the Court of Justice, and now we're in Strasbourg, and on Monday we'll see the European Parliament as it exists here. But we've met some important people along the way. Roberta Metsola, who is she? We saw her last week.
President of the Parliament, and quite a fan of the Paladins.
Very much a friend of Furman.
Yeah, friend of Furman. She worked with us for a long, long time when we had an internship program in Brussels, and she still loves Furman. Elise Peeler, one of our alums, is working there in her office, works as one of her policy advisors. So we had a nice interview with President Metsola in her office in the Parliament, and then we got a private tour of the Parliament. So it's always nice to have a connection on the inside, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yes.
We also went to Politico. Lane, what did we learn there?
Well, one of the main takeaways I learned was that a lot of Europeans don't really pay attention to EU politics. They care more about their national politics or the regional politics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we met with Sarah Wheaton, who is one of the senior reporters at Politico.eu. So that's Politico, but it focuses on Europe. And Sarah also hosts one of the most popular podcasts on Europe. In fact, it probably is the most popular podcast on EU politics. And that is Brussels Playbook now. It used to be called EU Confidential, but it's a weekender playbook. Anyway, she was so wonderful to meet with us and talk about how Americans know about as much about the EU as Europeans do, which is not very much.
Two people that met with, one was EU and North American relations, and he said something very similar of how the EU just doesn't know, people in the European Union don't know as much as they want to, or as they care, and us in the US know more, or know about the same, and it's just, that was shocking to me that they just, what goes on is not really reported on.
Well, it's reported on.
It's reporting on, but it's not like...
No one's paying to look at it.
Yeah.
Right. One of the most interesting insights that Sweden had was that politicians in the EU don't want to be harassed or heckled or talked to by the press.
Yeah.
And that's very different than the American politicians who, particularly, I mean, just think of performative actors like Trump or McConnell a few years ago. They love being in front of the camera, but in the EU, the politicians don't like that, which I found very, very, very curious and intriguing.
You put it more harsh than I was going to say. I was going to say they don't like being interviewed.
Right.
Yeah, I think it has to do with the incentives. In the United States, politicians need to be out in front of people all the time. Their name has to be out there. And in the EU, most of them are working in a little bit more obscure positions, and they don't have to go out and get elected by the European citizenry. The Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, does not have to run a continent-wide campaign. And the MEPs run relatively local campaigns. They want to be on TV at home. They don't want to be quoted by Politico, which could just get them in trouble. So, yeah, the incentives are different, and I thought that was interesting. Well, as we've traveled for over 2 weeks now, I think, or I guess it's 2 weeks.
About 2 weeks, yeah.
Exactly 2 weeks. We call this Tocqueville Fellows in the wild.
Right.
And, this is we're in France. This is Tocqueville's home country, right?
Oh, yeah.
So we're following in his footsteps. I don't know that he was ever to Strasbourg, though. I think it was German territory. No, well, not quite.
18.
Well,
we can ask ChatGPT.
Oh, my word.
No, I think
we can ask our amazing guys.
It became German territory in 1870, and he had passed away in the 1850s. But anyway, we're here on his home turf, and he was certainly a guy who had an interest in European politics generally, and on the continent. He was foreign minister of France for a little bit. And so, what is the state of European politics today? What can we say we have learned about what's going on in the EU in the summer of 2026, other than it's super hot?
Heat dome.
Yes.
If I could start, what I've found through the news, our interactions with certain leaders, such as Roberta Metsola and random people I've gotten to speak with, the state of the European Union is divided in certain regards politically. There's a lot more tension between the far right and the far left, but there does seem to be a unified stance against Russian aggression, especially in Ukraine, and I think that could push them toward a greater union and possibly an enlargement.
What have we seen a lot of that indicates support for Ukraine?
A lot of
flags. A lot of flags.
Flags.
Also, I feel like it was in Bruges and Ghent where we saw just blue and yellow symbolizing the Ukrainian flag, but not flags necessarily.
EU flags.
Not EU flags, just blue and then yellow, kind of like portraying the Ukrainian flag, but not the Ukrainian flag.
So a lighter blue.
Yeah, lighter blue than the EU flag.
Yeah, one of our guides in Bruges or Ghent, one in Bruges or Ghent, discussed that maybe around half the Flemish people want some sort of independence from Belgium, which I thought was very, very interesting. And we talked about it in our class, but there is that language divide, that cultural divide between those two regions. So I know you talked about there's some unification, like a push for unification, but there are experiences with some of those states and countries, it may be a little difficult to do that if they're dividing among themselves even more. Do you think that's fair to say, Lane? Or
Between regional?
Between regions,
differences?
yeah. I mean,
Oh, certainly. I mean, I spoke to a Flemish man at a soccer game. Oh, football here. They get very angry and call it soccer. And he firmly rejected an EU identity, affirming his regional identity as a Flemish man. Very respectfully, though. But I do agree that there's regional differences, and we've obviously seen that, learned it. But through talking with individuals, I think there's also a cultural rift across Europe, mainly between immigrants coming in from the Middle East specifically, and Syria, and leftovers from the 2016 Syrian refugee crisis. There's just this cultural difference between the West and the Islamic East that seems to be boiling at certain points.
But there is a move, and I think I've learned this a little bit more being at the commission, being at the council, that enlargement is very much on the agenda. It is the European Union's foreign policy. They can secure more countries for Western influence, pulling them away from any possibility of being lined up with Moscow. And you have to do that by bringing them into the EU. That, of course, is problematic because expansion requires more MEPs, more council members, more commissioners.
Bigger offices.
More buildings. They really have... they have a bit of a space problem, but
it's not just logistics either. There is a question of what makes the states European, what makes something European. Can the EU let them in too?
We saw that with Turkey.
We do. One of the big questions right now is Turkey European?
I love doner kebab.
You love doner kebab, so you think it's pro-EU, right?
Turkey?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. No?
I mean, many people would like to be in the EU. There's just a problem with Erdogan and his government. I think waiting him out and his policies will tell us later whether they join the EU.
Yeah, I don't particularly think that Europe wants Turkey in the EU. It's a very, very large country, and it's culturally different. The religious divide is a cultural divide as well, and I think a lot of Europeans don't have a positive view of Turks having freedom of movement throughout Europe. So I think that's going to be difficult. But I do think that primarily Ukraine, that's the big question. Bringing Ukraine into the EU and doing it maybe in stages or something like that. We heard about that. The Balkan countries, some of the small ones, have been working very hard to get to the point where they could join, and I think that's probably going to happen for some, like Montenegro and Macedonia. But it has become a security issue. Whereas, and I think that's beating down some of the opposition to expansion to maybe the size of 30 member states, which is still a significant expansion. Well, what else have we learned about just cultural things? All of you have had conversations with various people. What have you learned from just conversations on the street?
One of our guides in Brussels, she has 2 sons. And she sent one of her kids to something called unschooling.
Oh, haven't heard of that.
I haven't heard of that, no.
Yeah.
So essentially what it is it's the kids are thrown until they have all the resources they need, but there's no professors, there's no teachers.
Okay.
And for the first few weeks, they'll just do whatever they want. And then they'll be bored, and then they'll learn on their own. And that worked for her son. So we started talking about educational systems and educational reforms and in the EU in comparison to the States and private versus public education. And one thing in the EU is there's this massive emphasis on that socialized aspect of education. disseminate to the bottom through like institutional work, and then like higher taxes and paying for these schools and things like that, which is a stark contrast to the States.
I go ahead, Dr. Nelson.
Well, you totally lost me when you said no professors.
I remember reading about that somewhere. Well, for me, I guess it's more of a personal one, but I have severe food allergies, anaphylaxis, and I have noticed a difference in the food and how the European Union has treated food allergies. I have, from all of our tour guides, gotten a little slip of paper with French, German, Dutch, Luxembourgish. I feel like at one point there was like Flemish. There might have been Flemish. I don't remember. But like little cards just having my food allergies listed out, so I can hand it to the waiter and being like, "Hey, I can't have these certain foods. Make sure that my food is okay." And I was doing a little bit more research, and that is a big European policy of having at least the 14 major food allergies listed out and labeled on food in the grocery store and in restaurants, and vastly different than the US that I have found, where people have not cared as much according to for food allergies.
So you're saying it's the law, but they don't follow it?
In the US, some stuff don't follow it.
Oh, in the US.
In the US, but here in the European Union, a lot of places do follow that law, and it's a European Union law to have that out. France is a little different, but I will say for the rest of the European Union, it is very, very well done.
Okay.
Personally, for me, I've been to Europe several times, and I think everyone's noticed a religious decline in Europe in terms of being the center for Western cultural religion in terms of Christianity, Catholicism, and the Reformation. It's been declining, but there seems to be a resurgence, not necessarily in the religious aspect of Christianity, but in the cultural aspect of identifying as a Christian. And this seems to be in protest of the growing influence of Islam and Muslim immigrants coming in. And I did speak with the same guide, Laura was her name, with the two children, with the one who has free roaming school.
Yeah.
And she suggests that there is not a future where Europeans can peacefully coexist with Islam on a fundamentally ideological level, in her opinion. And if that's representative of a certain chunk of Europe, then I don't see any peaceful integration going forward between the two.
Zach, you mentioned your conversation with the guy at the soccer match about identity, and that's been one of the themes of this trip through Europe, trying to understand what a European identity would look like, what it's looked like in the past. What is your sense of the state of Europeanness? In a world, let's just say, in a world that's more dangerous for Europe, it's caught between a more aggressive United States that has made it clear that the U.S. wants Europe to bear more of its own security burden and wants it to be more of a trading partner that does not block U.S. goods. Let's put it favorably that way. And then you've got Russia, which is trying to take a chunk of Europe, and every day we hear about incursions into Romania or into the Baltics, where right now it's sort of accidental trans-border fallout from the war, I guess is the best way to put it, but could get more aggressive in the future. And then, of course, China is a huge problem for Europe because they seem to be willing to transport a lot of things here and then take nothing in return. As one person put it, the containers come filled with Chinese goods and return with air. And so you've got a Europe that has always existed best, and it's flourished most when the world is open to trade and to movement of money and people, and does less well when things are closed down. But one idea is that when the world turns against Europe, Europe will become more conscious of its identity as a single entity in this competitive world. That's the theory. Do we see that on the street?
I don't necessarily know if we see it on the street with ordinary citizens. I think the elites, definitely political elites, push that pretty consistently. And I think that the political elites are a little more cognizant and worried about the rise of far-right parties and how that may, particularly those who want this deintegration of Europe, how powerful they are. We spoke with Roberta Metsola, and she said that there are some safeguards and ways to ensure that these far-right parties don't really have power in Parliament. And it seems very undemocratic. Right? We walk outside and we see democracy on big blue lettering, and then there's comments made like that. And it's that contradiction, I think, is indicative of Europe realizing that maybe there isn't a lot of stability within this institution, and there's got to be some ways to acquire that stability. But I think, I agree, I think Europe's going to have to unite out of necessity, given external conflicts. And just the ways they do that, I think it'd be messy. But nonetheless, at some point, I think that's going to be a possibility, particularly with the U.S. Pulling out of some trade agreements with Europe. We spoke with an economic advisor at the Commission. The Commission, and he did say that press and media definitely inflate the U.S. pulling back on trade agreements. The EU and the U.S. still trade quite a bit. So it's maybe not so much of a worry as people may think it is. Nonetheless, I still think that U.S. pulling out, Russia, if you want to talk about the rise of Islam, is going to force the EU to unite in some way.
I would like to just, I don't know if it's really push back or just raise the issue. I certainly hear you when you say that the elites that sit in the Brussels institutions talk a lot about the right-wing parties, and they make it clear that there is a wall between them and the right-wing parties. They don't want the right-wing parties to take control. But we've just been through some museums that have talked about the erosion of democracy in the 1920s and particularly 1930s, and how the awful consequences of that particular history. And so we don't have that in the United States. We're not as conscious of that. But I do think that among elites especially, they're very much aware that democracy erodes a little bit at a time. So I guess I'm defending the elites just a little bit. But it's true, it feels undemocratic. But their response would be, well, those parties are undemocratic.
Right. I mean, from a pragmatical perspective, it's, if you're going to allow parties that are going to erode democracy, I mean, you can say you're protecting democracy by being undemocratic to an extent, you know?
Yeah.
But that's just the issue that they're facing right now. So I guess I'm using it more to give evidence to there maybe is some instability. There is instability in these institutions and their ability to unite. Please jump in.
No, just to speak with Dr. Nelsen on that, Roberta Metsola did talk about how between the socialists and the Christian Democrats there was unity going forward in the parliament for many years, and now with the rise of the far right, it's hard to get a coalition or get a direct stance on an issue. But her defense of shutting the far right out was very plausible, in the fear of returning to fascism, and especially the Nazis, especially with the rise of anti-Semitism in Europe right now being a main issue. So I do understand her willingness to shut them out, even if it is undemocratic.
Y'all kind of mentioned this in what y'all were saying, and this is the history in me kind of coming out and seeing these things, but it's like the memory of World War II and of the 1930s is still there. And the EU was built on this memory of, we're going to do something great and we're going to make sure that this doesn't happen. And so it's like that memory is still there and ingrained in these EU institutions and these more modern politicians in the European Union.
I will say too, from individuals that we met, there is some anti-German sentiment that they're pretty clear about, particularly in Belgium. Even on our first day, this is the verbiage that they use to describe Germany and everything that's gone down, and even describing what's going on in Germany today. There is definitely that sentiment, and it's because, you're right, Maddie, because, technically because of the wars.
Yeah.
Both of them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it's hidden here in Strasbourg, but I still feel like there's a little bit of that. I don't know if y'all could pick that up, but
anti-German?
And just anti-German, or there. So in Strasbourg, there are a lot of German buildings because in both World Wars, this area was fought over constantly by both France and Germany. And I guess this is me reading into the politics and the history and just trying to understand it. But it feels like that today it's trying to identify more as French than German. And while Strasbourg does have a lot of those German buildings, we saw the Cathedral of Notre Dame, but here in Strasbourg, the Strasbourg Notre Dame, and it was Gothic, but it seemed French. I don't know, there was a French aspect to it.
Well, it is built in a more French Gothic style, yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you. There's a residual sense that Germany has always been the country that has taken us over and been occupying us. So if it was the Prussians or if it was the Germans, they were always the baddies who came and tried to either Germanize us or Nazify us. Right. And we saw a lot of that in the museum yesterday. So I think that is important. That residual historical memory is always going to be there, and I do think that feeds into the concern with the far right. J.D. Vance came to Munich and said just kind of what you did, Zach, that the European Union is ignoring the democratic will of the far right by instituting this cordon sanitaire and keeping them out. He has a point, but then you also have a point with, well, we've seen this movie before and it didn't end very well. We can't allow undemocratic movements to undermine democracy. That may mean that democracy has to get better at doing what it's supposed to do, which is govern justly and equitably.
Well, in ancient Greek and Roman times, kind of just jumping to Aristotle and Plato, but the downfall of democracy was a tyranny and a tyrant, and so that we kind of saw that in World War II, and I think the founders of the European Union didn't want that again. Had seen what happened in Greece, in ancient Greece. I mean, we saw what happened in ancient Rome. We saw what happened in World War II, and so it's just how can we help Europa to thrive?
And I think we can bring this to a conclusion. A number of the museums, but especially the one yesterday in Mosul, seemed when we got to the end after this long recounting of atrocities throughout the region, it really was the founding of the EU. I don't know if you all got into the room where there was a multi
lights and
lights.
Yeah.
I felt like a fever.
Had
dream.
Eurovision.
Yeah.
Eurofoot.
If anybody was triggered by flashing lights, that would have sent them over the edge. But it was I wasn't able to stay in for a whole running of the show, but it really did focus on getting past the competition, the nationalism, the violence of the 20th century, and moving forward in a European Union that looks forward in in a united way.
Mm-hmm.
Now, maybe that's completely naive. I'm willing to entertain that, especially at a time when there's deeper geopolitical competition around the world among multiple poles.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still a great vision that is powerful when it is lined up next to the atrocities that you saw in Strasbourg and in certainly in the East, in Poland and other places. I think, didn't one of our guides say that Strasbourg had the only concentration camp outside of
France.
Yeah.
or in France.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The only one in France. And so they understood what was going on here. They experienced it. So lots of complicated things to think through when we think about 200 years of European history, or, as we have done, going all the way back to Rome. But it is a joy to get out and see it, right? Yeah, Lane.
Speaking of joy, one final thing that I noticed in the museum is as you start to see the Germification going to the Nazification, it started with Hitler's speeches. And they would get faster and faster, showing the brutality of Nazification and how it took over parts of France. But at the end, you have Ode to Joy, the national anthem for the EU. And all I could hear was Freude, joy. Joy, this peace and this unity and brotherhood that they formed.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned unity, and you mentioned Eurovision, and we had discussed this in our class of where, especially now, Eurovision, even though it has Australia, but then also the UK, Great Britain, even though after Brexit they left the European Union, and then also Israel, and all of these different countries. It's a way for people to be unified through something other than politics or through history. It's through music. It's through the arts. It's through something that people can enjoy after they put on these performances. And so tying that back to this idea of the atrocities, I think people are searching for a way to look past what happened and look for a better future. So there is hope. But it will take a while.
Yeah, I don't know that ABBA is going to bring peace to Europe, but
it's great.
Anyway, yes, that is true. It raises lots of questions of who's a European and all of that. But I think we're going to leave it there. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Tocqueville Talks. This episode was produced by Audrey Enghauser. Lucy Southwell provided administrative support. The theme music is called The Girl I Left Behind Me, a popular folk song in early 19th century America, here performed by Jacob Taylor Armerding. To learn more about our lecture series and events, our Tocqueville and Beaumont Fellows programs for undergraduates, and to listen to episodes, watch event recordings, or support our work, search on Google for the Tocqueville Center at Furman University. If you enjoyed the episode, please like, subscribe, comment, and share Tocqueville Talks on all your favorite listening services. And visit our YouTube channel for full recordings of past events and episodes. Until next time, goodbye.